Chapter 1. The Shadow Thief's Burden. The gaslights of Veritas flickered, casting long, dancing shadows across the cobblestone streets. It was the hour Ira both craved and dreaded the gloaming, when the world teetered between day's fading glory and night's encroaching embrace. For most, it was a time of respite, of returning to hearth and home. For Ira, it was the beginning of her nightly hunt, her eternal penance. She moved with the practiced grace of a predator, her dark cloak blending seamlessly with the deepening twilight. Her boots made no sound against the stones, her presence as silent and inevitable as the night itself. Beneath the hood, her face was pale, framed by raven hair that seemed to absorb what little light remained. Her eyes, the color of amethyst caught in a storm, scanned the alleyways, searching, always searching. For a century, Ira had been the night collector, cursed to gather pieces of darkness each sunset, condemned to wander the mortal realm harvesting shadows, nightmares, and forgotten things. It was a lonely existence, a constant reminder of the life she had lost, the love she had been forced to abandon. If she failed to collect her quota of darkness before dawn, she'd be dragged back to the shadow realm, a fate she had narrowly avoided countless times. Each sunrise was both a reprieve and a renewal of her torment. Tonight, the city of Veritas offered a meager harvest. The shadows were thin, diluted by the artificial glow of the gaslights. The new inventions, they said, were driving back the darkness. For most, that was a comfort. For Ira, it was a threat. She needed the shadows, craved their inky substance like a parched man craves water. She paused beneath a flickering lamp, her gaze drawn to a group of children playing in the street. Their laughter, bright and innocent, grated against her ears. It was a sound she could never truly share, a joy she was forever denied. But it was their shadows that called to her, rich and untainted by the worries of the adult world. With a sigh that was more weariness than regret, Ira extended her hand. Her fingers, long and slender, glowed with a faint, ethereal light. The children's shadows stretched, distorted, then snapped free, flowing towards her like liquid night. The laughter didn't cease, the children didn't notice, but Ira felt the subtle shift, the tiny piece of their innocence she had stolen. It was a small darkness, a necessary theft. She absorbed it, feeling the familiar, bittersweet rush of power. It was never enough, never truly satisfying, but it kept the shadow realm at bay. She moved on, a wraith in the gathering darkness. She collected the shadow of a lie whispered between lovers, the lingering fear from a beggar's nightmare, the forgotten memory of a lost glove discarded in a gutter. Each piece was a fragment of the human experience, a sliver of the darkness that resided in every heart. Ira was their unwilling collector, their silent confessor. As the night deepened, a sense of unease settled upon her. The shadows were not only thin, they were wrong, tainted. There was a subtle dissonance, a discordant note in the symphony of the night. It was a feeling she hadn't encountered in decades, a prickling of her senses that warned of something ancient and malevolent stirring. She paused on a rooftop, overlooking the sprawling city. Veritas was a jewel of the mortal realm, a hub of innovation and progress. But beneath the veneer of civilization, something was festering, something that resonated with the darkness within her, a darkness that was both familiar and terrifying. "Show yourself," she whispered to the night, her voice a mere breath of sound. The wind answered, swirling around her, carrying the scent of decay and the faint whisper of children's cries. Ira closed her eyes, letting the darkness flow through her, searching for the source of the disturbance. It was then she felt a presence, vast and ancient, lurking just beneath the surface of reality. It was a presence that knew her, that called to her. A shiver ran down her spine, a mixture of fear and longing. It was the call of the Shadow Lord, the entity who had cursed her, the master of the realm she so desperately sought to escape. He was returning, and his return heralded a danger far greater than her nightly struggle for survival. It was a danger that threatened not only her, but the entire mortal realm. Ira opened her eyes, her gaze fixed on the distant horizon. The first hint of dawn was beginning to paint the sky with streaks of pale gray. She had failed to collect her quota. Again, the shadow realm beckoned, its icy tendrils reaching for her, promising oblivion and release. But tonight, something was different. Tonight, she felt a flicker of defiance, a spark of rebellion against her fate. She wouldn't be dragged back, not this time. She would find the source of the tainted shadows, confront the Shadow Lord, and break the curse that bound her. Even if it meant facing the darkness within herself, the darkness that had become both her prison and her only companion. She had a century of stolen shadows to fuel her, and a burning desire for freedom that even the Shadow Lord couldn't extinguish. And, for perhaps the first time in 100 years, a trace of hope. Because this new darkness, this spreading wrongness, it was changing things. And change, Ira knew, was the only thing that could possibly break a century-old curse. The first rays of dawn touched her skin, and Ira vanished, leaving only the whisper of the wind and the lingering scent of shadows in her wake. The hunt was over, but a far greater challenge had just begun. Chapter 2. The Hunter's Misconception. Lucian Vale, the realm's foremost monster hunter, adjusted the intricate lenses of his spectro-analyzer, a frown etched onto his brow. The device, a marvel of engineering and arcane craftsmanship, hummed softly, its brass gears whirring in a complex dance. He was kneeling beside a young boy, no older than 7, who lay in an unnaturally deep sleep. The child's face was pale, his breathing shallow, his eyelids fluttering as if trapped in a vivid, unsettling dream. Readings are consistent with the other cases. Professor, his assistant, a young woman named Clara, reported, her voice tight with concern. Elevated etheric disturbance, diminished vital essence, and a peculiar resonance with the shadow spectrum. Lucian grunted, his gaze never leaving the child. Peculiar indeed. It's as if their shadows are infected. He had been summoned to Veritas by the city's council, tasked with investigating a growing epidemic of unnatural sleep. Children across the city were falling victim to this strange malady, slipping into a coma-like state plagued by vivid nightmares. The healers were baffled, their remedies proving useless. The whispers had begun whispers of curses, of demonic influence, of a vengeful spirit preying on the innocent. Lucian, a man of science and reason, scoffed at such superstitions. He believed in the tangible, the measurable, the explainable. He was a hunter, not of mythical beasts, but of the hidden truths that governed the world. He had dedicated his life to proving that all supernatural phenomena, no matter how bizarre, could be understood and contained through the application of logic and arcane science. He had tracked down werewolves that were merely men afflicted with a rare blood disease, exposed ghosts as elaborate illusions created by disgruntled inventors, and debunked countless claims of demonic possession as cases of misunderstood mental illness. He was a champion of reason in a world still clinging to the remnants of superstition. But this was different. The sleeping sickness defied his initial attempts at explanation. There was no discernible pathogen, no logical cause, no earthly explanation for the children's plight. The only clue, the only anomaly, was the strange disturbance in their shadows, the infection that his spectro-analyzer had detected. He had spent the past few nights combing the city, searching for any sign of the source of this disturbance. He had examined the city's water supply, tested the air for unusual toxins, and even analyzed the newly installed gas lights, suspecting some unforeseen side effect. All to no avail. Tonight, however, he had a new lead. A witness, a street urchin, had reported seeing a shadow woman lurking near the homes of several afflicted children. The description was vague, fantastical, but it was the only concrete lead he had. A woman who moved like smoke, with eyes that glowed in the dark and a touch that stole the light from the world. A creature of the night, a thief of shadows. Lucian, despite his skepticism, was prepared to investigate. He had learned, over his years of hunting, that even the most outlandish claims often held a grain of truth, a distorted reflection of a reality that defied easy explanation. He rose from his crouch, his long coat swirling around him. "Clara, prepare the etheric traps. We're going hunting." "But Professor," Clara hesitated. The witness described a woman, not a monster. Lucian smiled, a cold, determined glint in his eyes. "My dear Clara, sometimes the most dangerous monsters wear the most human faces. And sometimes," he added, adjusting a small, silver device on his wrist, "they steal shadows." He followed the witness's directions, venturing into the labyrinthine alleys and darkened streets where the shadow woman had been seen. He moved with the confidence of a seasoned hunter, his senses alert, his hand never far from the array of gadgets and enchanted tools that hung from his belt. He found her near the city's oldest church, a crumbling edifice dedicated to a long-forgotten deity. She was standing in the shadow of a gargoyle, her form barely visible in the gloom. He watched her for a moment, his spectro-analyzer clicking softly. The readings were off the charts. The air around her crackled with etheric energy, her shadow unnaturally deep, almost alive. He saw her reach out, her hand glowing with an eerie light, and touch the shadow of a stray cat. The cat didn't react, but Lucian saw the subtle shift, the faint dimming of its shadow, as if a piece of its essence had been stolen. This was it. The culprit. The creature responsible for the children's suffering. He felt a surge of righteous anger, a hunter's instinct to protect the innocent from the darkness that preyed upon them. He stepped out of the shadows, his voice ringing out in the night. "Hold, creature. You are under arrest for the crime of etheric theft and endangering the lives of the innocent." Ira, startled by the sudden intrusion, spun around. Her amethyst eyes widened as she saw him, his tall figure silhouetted against the faint glow of the streetlights. She recognized the intent in his stance, the glint of steel in his hand, the aura of righteous certainty that surrounded him. He was a hunter, and she was his prey. For a fleeting moment, their eyes met. Lucian saw not the monstrous creature he expected, but a woman of ethereal beauty, her face etched with weariness and a hint of sadness. But the moment passed, replaced by the cold certainty of his mission. He had found his monster, and he would bring her to justice. He had no idea that he had just stumbled into a conflict far older and more complex than he could possibly imagine, a conflict that would challenge his every belief and force him to confront the shadows within his own heart. He also, perhaps more importantly at that moment, had no inkling that the woman before him was far more than just a culprit. She was his salvation, and his potential doom. Chapter 3. Unnatural Slumber. Iris stared at the man who had emerged from the shadows, his words echoing in the stillness of the night. Creature? Etheric theft? The accusations were absurd, yet the conviction in his voice was undeniable. He truly believed she was responsible for the children's suffering. "You are mistaken," she said, her voice low and laced with a weariness that spanned centuries. "I am not the cause of this sickness." Lucian raised an eyebrow, his gaze sweeping over her, taking in her dark cloak, her pale skin, the unnatural glow in her eyes. "The evidence suggests otherwise. I've seen you steal shadows. I've detected the etheric disturbance that surrounds you. You fit the description of the creature witnessed near the afflicted children." Ira sighed. Explaining her curse to this hunter was futile. He wouldn't believe her, not without proof, and proof was something she couldn't easily provide. The Shadow Realm was not a place one could simply visit and return from. "I collect shadows," she admitted, "but I do not harm anyone. It is a necessity." "A necessity?" Lucian scoffed. "Stealing the essence of living beings is hardly necessary. It's a violation." He took a step closer, his hand tightening on the silver device on his wrist. It emitted a faint hum, and Ira felt a subtle pull, a tugging at her own shadow. It was an etheric trap, designed to bind creatures of darkness. She knew she could easily evade him. She could melt into the shadows, disappear into the night, leaving him with nothing but his misplaced accusations. But something held her back. It wasn't just the faint hope that she might find an ally in this stubborn, misguided man. It was the wrongness in the shadows, the taint that she had felt earlier. She needed to understand it, to find its source, and perhaps, Just perhaps, this hunter, with his strange devices and his unwavering conviction, could help her. "The children," she said, her voice taking on a sharper edge. "Their slumber, it is unnatural. Something is feeding on their dreams, their shadows. It's not me." Lucian paused, his eyes narrowing. He studied her, searching for any sign of deception. He was a skilled interrogator, able to detect the slightest flicker of falsehood in a person's voice, the smallest tremor of deceit in their eyes. But Ira's gaze was steady, her voice unwavering. There was a sincerity in her words that, despite his suspicions, he couldn't entirely dismiss. He lowered his wrist slightly, the pull on her shadow lessening. "You claim to know the cause of this sickness?" "I know it's not natural," Ira replied. "The shadows are tainted. There's a presence, something ancient and malevolent, lurking beneath the surface." Lucian frowned. His scientific mind rebelled against such vague pronouncements. Yet his spectro-analyzer had confirmed the unusual disturbance in the children's shadows. And his instincts, honed by years of hunting, told him that Ira, despite being a creature of darkness, was not lying. "If you're not responsible," he said slowly, "then who or what is?" Ira hesitated. She couldn't reveal the Shadow Lord, not yet. She didn't know his full intentions, his plans. And she certainly couldn't reveal her curse, the connection between her own existence and the encroaching darkness. "I don't know," she said, choosing her words carefully. "But I can feel it. It's growing stronger." Lucian considered her words, weighing them against his own observations. He was a man of logic, but he was also a pragmatist. He knew that the world held mysteries that defied easy explanation, that sometimes the most unbelievable truths were hidden in plain sight. "Very well," he said, making a decision. "I will offer you a temporary reprieve. We will work together to find the true cause of this sleeping sickness." "But," he added, his voice hardening, "if I discover that you are deceiving me, if I find any evidence that you are involved, I will not hesitate to bring you to justice." Ira nodded, a flicker of something akin to relief passing across her face. "Agreed. But you must understand, Hunter, that the darkness we are dealing with is unlike anything you have ever encountered." "I've faced my share of darkness," Lucian retorted, a hint of arrogance in his voice. "I am not afraid." Ira smiled, a fleeting, almost sad smile. "Fear is not the issue. Understanding is. And the shadows, they do not yield their secrets easily." She turned and began to walk away, her cloak blending with the darkness. Lucian hesitated for a moment, then followed her, his spectro-analyzer clicking softly in his hand. He had made a bargain with a creature of the night, a suspected monster. It was a dangerous gamble, a leap of faith into the unknown. But he was driven by a need to protect the innocent, to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. As they moved deeper into the city's shadowed heart, Lucian couldn't shake the feeling that he had just crossed a threshold, that he had stepped into a world where the lines between reality and nightmare blurred, where the hunter could easily become the hunted. And as he glanced at Ira's retreating form, he wondered if he had just made the biggest mistake of his life, or perhaps the most important discovery of his career. He had a suspicion, a growing, unsettling suspicion, that this sickness was only the beginning of a far greater darkness that threatened to consume them all. And he had just allied himself with the one being who might hold the key to stopping it, or unleashing it upon the world. Chapter 4. A Touch Without Consequence. The air in the abandoned apothecary was thick with the scent of dust and decay. Moonlight filtered through the grimy windows, illuminating shelves lined with empty bottles and jars, remnants of a forgotten practice. Ira moved through the room with a practiced ease, her senses alert to any sign of the presence she had felt earlier. Lucian followed close behind, his spectro-analyzer held before him like a divining rod. "The disturbance is stronger here," he muttered, his brow furrowed in concentration. "But I can't pinpoint the source." Ira stopped before a large, oak cabinet, its doors hanging askew. She reached out and touched the wood, her fingers tracing the intricate carvings. The wood was cold, unnaturally so, and a faint tremor ran through her hand. "It's close," she said, her voice barely a whisper. Something is hidden here. Lucian moved beside her, his spectro-analyzer clicking rapidly. The needle on the device was fluctuating wildly, indicating a significant etheric disturbance. He examined the cabinet, running his hand along the surface, searching for any hidden mechanisms or secret compartments. "I don't see anything," he said, frustration creeping into his voice. No hidden doors, no magical seals, nothing. Ira closed her eyes, focusing her senses. She reached out with her awareness, extending her perception beyond the physical realm into the ethereal plane that overlay the world of mortals. She felt it then, a subtle distortion, a ripple in the fabric of reality, hidden behind the cabinet. "There's something behind it," she said, her voice taking on an urgent tone. "A hidden space, a pocket dimension." Lucian looked at her skeptically. "A pocket dimension? That's highly improbable." Ira ignored his skepticism. She knew what she felt. She had encountered such hidden spaces before, places where the veil between worlds was thin, where the laws of reality were bent and twisted. She stepped back from the cabinet, her hands glowing with a faint, ethereal light. She began to chant, her voice a low, melodic hum that resonated with the darkness around them. The air in the room shimmered, the shadows deepening, swirling around her like a living entity. Lucian watched, his scientific mind struggling to comprehend what he was seeing. He had witnessed magic before, had studied its principles, its applications, but this was something different. This was raw power, primal and untamed. As Ira's chanting reached a crescendo, the air before the cabinet rippled, then tore, revealing a gaping hole in reality. It was a swirling vortex of darkness, a window into another dimension. The scent of decay intensified, and a faint whisper of children's cries echoed from the void. Lucian gasped, his spectro-analyzer buzzing frantically. "Incredible, it's a dimensional breach." Ira lowered her hands, her face pale with exertion. The portal remained open, pulsing with a sickly, ethereal light. "That's where it's coming from," she said, her voice strained. "The source of the sickness." Lucian stared into the void, his mind racing. He had never encountered anything like this before. It was a scientific impossibility, a violation of the laws of physics, yet it was undeniably real. He took a tentative step towards the portal, his curiosity overcoming his apprehension. He reached out, his hand trembling slightly, and touched the edge of the dimensional breach. He expected to feel a surge of energy, a shock, a burning sensation. He expected his hand to be ripped apart, consumed by the chaotic forces of another dimension. But nothing happened. He felt nothing. He looked at his hand, then back at Ira, his eyes wide with disbelief. I don't understand." Ira stared at him, her amethyst eyes filled with a mixture of surprise and something else. Something akin to wonder. She reached out, slowly, hesitantly, and touched his arm. Her fingers brushed against his skin, and Lucian felt nothing. No icy chill, no draining sensation, no feeling of his essence being stolen. He felt the warmth of her touch, the gentle pressure of her fingers. It was a sensation he had never experienced before, not from a creature of darkness. Ira gasped, her eyes widening. She pulled her hand back as if burned, but the expression on her face was not one of pain, but of astonishment. "You," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I can touch you." Lucian stared at her, his mind reeling. He knew what she meant. He had seen her steel shadows, had felt the subtle tug of her power. He knew that her touch was supposed to be draining, that she was supposed to be a creature of darkness, incapable of physical contact without causing harm. But he felt nothing. He was immune. He looked down at his wrist, at the silver device he wore, the device he had designed to protect him from etheric attacks. It was a prototype, a work in progress, based on his research into the properties of rare magical minerals. He had never tested it on a creature like Ira, had never imagined it would have such an effect. "My device," he murmured, his voice filled with awe. It's blocking your power. It's making me immune to your shadows." Ira stared at him, her gaze intense, searching. She took a step closer, her hand reaching out again, hesitantly, as if afraid to break the spell. She touched his cheek, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. Lucian felt the warmth of her touch, the softness of her skin. It was a sensation he had never experienced before, a sensation he had thought impossible. He looked into her eyes, and he saw not a monster, but a woman who had been denied the simple pleasure of human contact for a century. For a fleeting moment, the world outside the abandoned apothecary ceased to exist. There was only the two of them, standing in the dim moonlight, their hands touching, their eyes locked in a gaze that transcended the boundaries of hunter and hunted, of darkness and light. It was a moment of profound connection, a moment of unexpected intimacy, a moment that would forever change the course of their lives. And in that moment, Lucian realized that he had not only found the key to solving the mystery of the sleeping sickness, but he had also stumbled upon something far more precious, far more dangerous, a connection with a creature of the night, a woman who could steal shadows, but who had, for the first time in a century, found someone she could touch without consequence. He, Lucian Vale, monster hunter, was immune to the night collector. And that immunity, he now understood, was about to change everything. Chapter 5. The Bargain of Shadows. The implications of Lucian's immunity sank in slowly, like a stone dropped into a deep well. For Ira, it was a revelation, a crack in the wall of her century-long isolation. For Lucian, it was a scientific breakthrough, a validation of his theories, and a potential weapon against the darkness that plagued the city. "This changes things," Ira said, her voice still filled with wonder. She had not felt the touch of another human being without consequence for so long that the sensation was both exhilarating and terrifying. Lucian nodded, his mind racing. "It means you're not the source of the sickness. It means you might be the key to stopping it." He examined the silver device on his wrist, turning it over in his hands. This device, it's based on a rare mineral, lunar gent, found only in the deepest mines of the Shadow Mountains. It has unique etheric properties, able to disrupt the flow of shadow energy. He looked up at Ira, his eyes gleaming with scientific curiosity. "Your curse, it's tied to the shadow realm, isn't it?" "To shadows." Ira hesitated, then nodded. She had revealed too much already, broken too many of her self-imposed rules. But the touch, the connection, had loosened her tongue, weakened her resolve. "I am bound to collect shadows," she confessed. "It is a penance, a curse laid upon me by the Shadow Lord." Lucian's eyes widened. The Shadow Lord? A mythical being, said to rule the Shadow Realm. "You're saying he's real?" Ira smiled wryly. "As real as the shadows you hunt, hunter. And far more dangerous." The portal behind them pulsed, the whispers of children's cries growing louder. The urgency of their situation returned, pushing aside the momentary wonder of their connection. "We need to find the source of the sickness," Ira said, turning back to the dimensional breach. "And stop it before it spreads further." Lucian nodded, his scientific curiosity battling with his hunter's instincts. He wanted to study Ira, to understand the nature of her curse, the mechanics of her shadow manipulation. But he also knew that the children's lives were at stake. "The portal," he said, gesturing towards the swirling darkness. "It's a dimensional breach, a tear in the fabric of reality. It's unstable, dangerous. We need to find a way to close it." Ira looked at him, her expression grim. "Closing it won't be enough. The entity behind it, it's feeding on the children's dreams, their shadows. We need to find it and destroy it." Lucian hesitated. He was a hunter, not a slayer. He believed in containment, in understanding, not in blind destruction. But he also knew that some creatures, some forces, were too dangerous to be allowed to exist. "And how do you propose we do that?" he asked, his voice laced with skepticism. Ira's eyes met his, her gaze unwavering. "We go in." Lucian stared at her, his mind reeling. "Into the portal? Into another dimension? That's madness." "It's the only way," Ira insisted. "The entity is there, drawing power from the children's dreams. We need to confront it on its own ground." She looked at him, her expression softening. I know it's dangerous, but I can protect you. My powers, they're stronger in the shadows. And you, she added, a hint of warmth in her voice, you are immune to my curse. You are the only one who can accompany me without risk. Lucian considered her words, weighing the risks against the potential rewards. He was a scientist, an explorer of the unknown. He had always been drawn to the mysteries of the world, to the things that defied explanation. And this was the greatest mystery he had ever encountered. He looked at Ira, at her pale face, her amethyst eyes, her aura of quiet strength. He saw not a monster, but a woman burdened by a curse, a woman fighting for her freedom and for the lives of innocent children. He made his decision. All right, he said, his voice firm. I'll go with you. But we do this my way. We gather information, we analyze the situation, and we find a way to contain this entity, not just destroy it. Agreed? Ira hesitated, then nodded. Agreed. But be warned, Hunter. The Shadow Realm, it is not a place for the faint of heart. It will test you, challenge you, in ways you cannot imagine. She turned and faced the portal, her hands glowing with a faint, ethereal light. She began to chant, her voice low and melodic, and the swirling darkness of the portal intensified. Lucian took a deep breath, steeling his nerves. He adjusted the silver device on his wrist, ensuring it was secure. He had no idea what awaited them on the other side of the dimensional breach, but he was determined to face it with courage, with logic, and with the unexpected companionship of the Night Collector, the woman who could steal shadows, but who could also, it seemed, steal a hunter's heart. With a final, shared glance, they stepped into the portal, disappearing into the swirling vortex of darkness, leaving behind the world of mortals and venturing into the unknown realm of shadows and nightmares. The bargain had been struck. A hunter and a creature of darkness, united by a strange immunity and a shared purpose, venturing into the heart of a growing darkness that threatened to consume them all. Their journey had begun, a journey that would test their limits, challenge their beliefs, and forge a bond between them that was as unexpected as it was unbreakable. Chapter 6. Whispers of the Somnus. The transition through the portal was disorienting, a chaotic maelstrom of swirling shadows and distorted sensations. Lucian felt as if he were being pulled apart, stretched and compressed, his senses overloaded by the alien energies of the other dimension. He clung to Ira's hand, her touch the only anchor in the swirling chaos. Then, as suddenly as it began, the turmoil ceased. They stood on solid ground, the air around them still and heavy, thick with the scent of decay and the faint whisper of children's cries. Lucian looked around, his eyes struggling to adjust to the dim, ethereal light. They were in a twisted, distorted version of Veritas, a city of shadows and nightmares. Buildings loomed at impossible angles, their windows dark and empty, their walls covered in creeping vines of shadow. The streets were deserted, the silence broken only by the whispers and the occasional, distant sob. Welcome to the Somnus, Ira said, her voice barely a whisper. A reflection of the city, twisted by the entity's influence. Lucian's spectro-analyzer was buzzing frantically, the needles spinning wildly. The etheric disturbance is off the charts. It's like nothing I've ever seen. He looked at Ira, her form outlined against the eerie glow of the Somnus. She seemed stronger here, more at home. The shadows clung to her, danced around her, as if she were a part of this twisted realm. The entity, he said, his voice tight with apprehension. Where is it? Ira closed her eyes, extending her senses. She reached out with her awareness, probing the darkness, searching for the source of the disturbance. It's everywhere, she said, her voice strained. And nowhere. It's woven into the fabric of this place. She opened her eyes, her gaze fixed on a distant, towering structure that resembled the city's cathedral, but distorted, grotesque, its spire reaching towards the sky like a clawed hand. The cathedral, she said. That's where it's strongest. That's where we need to go. They began to move through the deserted streets, their footsteps echoing in the silence. The air grew colder, the whispers louder, As they approached the cathedral, Lucian felt a growing sense of unease, a prickling of his senses that warned of danger. As they rounded a corner, they saw them. Children. Dozens of them, standing motionless in the street, their eyes closed, their faces pale and gaunt. They were the children of Veritas, the victims of the sleeping sickness, their physical bodies in the mortal realm, their minds trapped here, in the somnus. Lucian gasped, his heart clenching with a mixture of horror and pity. He had seen the children in their comatose state, but seeing them here, in this twisted realm, was far more disturbing. "They're dreaming," Iris said, her voice filled with sorrow. Trapped in the entity's web. Lucian approached one of the children, a young girl with long, dark hair. He reached out, hesitantly, and touched her arm. He felt a jolt, a surge of energy, and a vision flooded his mind. He saw the girl, playing in a sunlit park, laughing with her friends. Then, the shadows deepened, the laughter faded, and a monstrous figure emerged from the darkness, its eyes glowing with a malevolent light. The figure reached out, its claws dripping with shadow, and the girl screamed, her voice echoing in the void. Lucian pulled his hand back, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He had seen the entity, felt its power, its hunger. "It's feeding on their fears," he said, his voice trembling. "It's trapping them in their nightmares." Ira nodded, her expression grim. "It's called the Somnus. An ancient entity that feeds on dreams, on shadows. It's been dormant for centuries, but something has awakened it. We need to stop it," Lucian said, his voice filled with determination. "We need to free these children." He looked at Ira, his eyes searching hers. "You said you could protect me. How?" Ira smiled, a fleeting, almost sad smile. "My powers are stronger here. I can manipulate the shadows, create illusions, defend us from the entity's attacks. But," she added, her voice dropping to a whisper, "the Somnus is powerful. It can twist your mind, your perceptions. You must be careful." She reached out and touched his arm, her fingers lingering on his skin. Lucian felt a surge of warmth, a sense of reassurance, that belied the danger that surrounded them. "Trust me," she said, her voice soft, yet firm. "We will face this together." Lucian nodded, his gaze locked with hers. He trusted her. He had to. She was his only guide, his only ally, in this nightmare realm. They turned and continued their journey towards the cathedral, the whispers of the Somnus growing louder, the shadows deepening around them. They were walking into the heart of darkness, into the lair of an ancient entity that fed on dreams. They were hunter and hunted, bound together by a strange immunity and a shared purpose. And they were determined to save the children, to silence the whispers, and to escape the Somnus, even if it meant facing their own deepest fears. The name, Somnus, echoed in the silence. It was a name that would soon be etched in their memories, a name that represented the darkness they were about to confront, a darkness that threatened to consume them both. Chapter 7. The Fading Immunity. The cathedral loomed before them, a grotesque parody of its real-world counterpart. Its stained glass windows, depicting scenes of faith and redemption, were shattered, replaced by swirling vortexes of shadow. The air around it crackled with etheric energy, and the whispers of the Somnus were almost deafening, a chorus of fear and despair. As they approached the cathedral's entrance, Lucian felt a tingling sensation on his wrist, a faint, pulsing ache beneath the silver device. He looked down, his eyes widening in alarm. The lunar gent, the rare mineral that granted him immunity to Ira's power, was dimming. Its usual silvery glow was fading, replaced by a dull, grayish hue. "Ira," he said, his voice urgent. "The device, it's failing." Ira looked at his wrist, her expression grim. "The Somnus, it's draining the etheric energy. It's weakening the lunar gent's protective field." Lucian felt a surge of panic. His immunity, his protection against Ira's curse, was fading. He was becoming vulnerable, a potential source of power for the Night Collector. He looked at Ira, his eyes searching hers. He saw not the monstrous creature he had initially believed her to be, but a woman burdened by a curse, a woman who had shown him kindness, trust, and a fleeting glimpse of intimacy. Could he trust her? Could he trust her not to take his shadow, not to succumb to the demands of her curse, especially now, when the temptation would be so strong? Ira met his gaze, her amethyst eyes filled with a mixture of concern and resolve. "I won't take from you, Lucian," she said, her voice firm. "I swear it. My curse, it demands shadows, nightmares, forgotten things. But it doesn't demand your shadow. Not anymore." Lucian hesitated, his mind struggling to reconcile his scientific reasoning with his growing trust in Ira. He knew the nature of her curse, the power it held over her. But he also knew the woman she had become, the woman who had fought alongside him, the woman who had touched him without consequence. He made his decision. He trusted her. "All right," he said, his voice still tinged with apprehension. "But we need to be careful. We need to find a way to restore the device's power, or at least limit its exposure to the somnus's influence." Ira nodded. "There are ways. Certain herbs, certain rituals, but we don't have time. We need to stop the somnus before it consumes the children completely." They entered the cathedral, stepping into a vast, cavernous space filled with swirling shadows and distorted echoes. The air was thick with the scent of decay, and the whispers of the somnus were almost unbearable, a constant barrage of fear and despair. As they moved deeper into the cathedral, they encountered more of the sleeping children, their minds trapped in the entity's web. They stood motionless, their faces contorted in expressions of terror, their bodies swaying slightly as if caught in an unseen wind. Lucian felt a growing sense of urgency. He had to find a way to stop the somnus, to free the children before it was too late. He examined the cathedral's architecture, searching for any clues, any signs of the entity's presence. He noticed that the shadows were thicker, more concentrated, around the altar, a large, stone structure at the far end of the cathedral. "The altar," he said, pointing towards the structure. "That's where the energy is strongest. That's where we'll find the somnus." Ira nodded. "Be careful, Lucian. The somnus will try to use your fears against you. It will create illusions, twist your perceptions. You must stay focused." As they approached the altar, the shadows around them began to coalesce, forming monstrous shapes, grotesque figures that lunged at them, their claws dripping with darkness. Ira raised her hands, her fingers glowing with a faint, ethereal light. She manipulated the shadows, creating a barrier, a shield of darkness that deflected the entity's attacks. "Stay close to me," she said, her voice strained. "I can protect you, but my power is limited." Lucian stayed close to Ira, his hand never far from the silver device on his wrist. He felt the tingling sensation growing stronger, the Lunargent's protective field weakening with each passing moment. They reached the altar, a large, stone structure covered in intricate carvings. The air around it crackled with etheric energy, and the whispers of the somnus were deafening, a chorus of fear and despair that threatened to overwhelm them. Suddenly, the shadows around the altar coalesced, forming a single, massive figure. It was the somnus, the ancient entity that fed on dreams, its form shifting, unstable, its eyes glowing with a malevolent light. The entity spoke, its voice a cacophony of whispers, a chorus of fear and despair that echoed through the cathedral. "You have come to challenge me?" It hissed, its voice dripping with contempt. "You, a mere mortal, and a cursed creature of the night? You are no match for my power." Lucian felt a wave of fear wash over him, but he stood his ground, his gaze fixed on the somnus. "We're here to stop you," he said, his voice firm. "To free the children you've trapped." The somnus laughed, a chilling sound that echoed through the cathedral. "You cannot stop me," it hissed. "I am the master of dreams, the weaver of nightmares. I am eternal." Ira stepped forward, her hands glowing with a faint, ethereal light. "You may be ancient, somnus," she said, her voice filled with defiance. "But you are not invincible. We will find a way to defeat you." The somnus turned its gaze towards Ira, its eyes narrowing. "Unite, collector," it hissed. "You dare defy me? You, who are bound to serve the Shadow Lord. You, who crave the darkness as much as I do. Ira's expression flickered for a moment, a hint of pain crossing her face. But she quickly regained her composure, her gaze hardening. I may be cursed, she said, her voice unwavering. But I am not your slave. And I will not let you harm these children. The somnus laughed again, a chilling sound that echoed through the cathedral. We shall see, it hissed. We shall see. The entity raised its hands, and the shadows around the altar surged towards Lucian and Ira, a wave of darkness that threatened to engulf them. The battle had begun. A battle between a hunter, a creature of darkness, and an ancient entity that fed on dreams. A battle for the lives of innocent children and for the fate of the city of Veritas. And as the shadows closed in, Lucian felt the Lunargent's protective field flicker and fade, leaving him vulnerable, exposed to the darkness and to the Night Collector's curse. His immunity was fading, and his fate, along with Ira's, now hung in the balance. Chapter 8. Echoes of a Forgotten Curse. The wave of darkness crashed over Lucian, and for a moment, he felt a chilling sensation, a draining of his energy, a glimpse of the power that Ira wielded. But then it was gone. He looked at his wrist. The Lunargent was now completely dull, its protective field extinguished. He was vulnerable. Ira stood beside him, her hands glowing with a fierce, ethereal light. She was holding back the shadows, creating a small, safe space around them, but Lucian could see the strain on her face, the beads of sweat forming on her brow. Lucian, she said, her voice urgent. I can't hold it back for long. The somnus is too strong. The somnus loomed before them, its form shifting, unstable, its eyes glowing with a malevolent light. You cannot resist me, it hissed, its voice a chorus of whispers. Your fears, your doubts, your regrets, they are all mine to consume. Lucian felt a wave of fear wash over him, but he fought it back, focusing on the task at hand. He had to find a way to defeat the somnus, to free the children, and to protect Ira. He looked around the altar, searching for any clues, any weaknesses. He noticed that the carvings on the altar depicted scenes of a ritual involving a group of figures surrounding a central object, an object that resembled a heart. Ira, he said, his voice urgent. The carvings, they depict a ritual. A ritual to contain the somnus? Ira followed his gaze, her eyes widening in recognition. It's the binding ritual, she said, her voice filled with a mixture of hope and dread. An ancient ritual used to imprison the somnus centuries ago. But how does it work? Lucian asked. What's the heart? Ira hesitated, her expression flickering with pain. She looked at the somnus, then back at Lucian, her eyes filled with a deep sorrow. The heart, it's a vessel, she said, her voice trembling. A vessel of pure shadow. A sacrifice. Lucian's mind raced. A sacrifice? A vessel of pure shadow? He looked at Ira, at her pale face, her amethyst eyes, her aura of quiet strength and ancient sorrow. He understood. Your curse, he said, his voice barely a whisper. The shadows you collect, they're not just a penance, are they? They're fueling the binding ritual. You're keeping the somnus imprisoned. Ira nodded, tears welling in her eyes. For a century, I have been the Night Collector, gathering shadows, keeping the somnus at bay. But the curse, it's weakening. The Shadow Lord, he's returning. And he's using the somnus to break free. Lucian felt a surge of anger, of outrage. Ira, the woman he had come to trust, the woman he had touched without consequence, was not a monster, but a victim, a prisoner of an ancient curse, a guardian of the mortal realm. We need to complete the ritual, he said, his voice firm. We need to imprison the somnus. But the vessel, Ira said, her voice choked with emotion. It requires a pure shadow, a shadow untainted by light. A shadow like mine. Lucian stared at her, his mind reeling. He understood the implications. To complete the ritual, to defeat the somnus, Ira would have to sacrifice herself, her essence, her very being. No, he said, his voice filled with desperation. There has to be another way. The somnus laughed, a chilling sound that echoed through the cathedral. "There's no other way," it hissed. "The Night Collector must fulfill her destiny. She must become the vessel, the prison, the sacrifice." The shadows around them surged forward, pressing against Ira's protective barrier. She staggered, her strength failing. "Lucian," she said, her voice weak. "There's no time. You must complete the ritual." She reached out, her hand trembling, and touched his cheek. Lucian felt a surge of warmth, a fleeting moment of connection, before the shadows enveloped them. He saw a vision, a memory, not his own, but Ira's. He saw a young woman, beautiful and vibrant, standing before a towering figure of darkness, the Shadow Lord. He saw the curse being laid upon her, the transformation, the agony, the loss. He saw a century of loneliness, of sacrifice, of unwavering dedication to protecting the mortal realm. The vision faded, and Lucian found himself standing alone before the altar, the somnus looming before him, its eyes glowing with triumph. Ira was gone, absorbed into the swirling shadows, her essence becoming the vessel, the prison, the sacrifice. Lucian felt a wave of grief, of loss, of rage, wash over him. He had failed her. He had failed to protect her, to save her from her curse. But he also knew what he had to do. He had to complete the ritual. He had to honor Ira's sacrifice. He looked at the carvings on the altar, his mind racing. He understood the ritual now, the sequence of actions, the incantations, the gestures. He raised his hands, his voice filled with a newfound power, a power born of grief, of rage, of love. He began to chant, his voice echoing through the cathedral, his words a mixture of arcane science and ancient magic. He was a hunter, a scientist, a man of reason. But he was also something more. He was a guardian, a protector, a man who had loved and lost, and who was now determined to avenge the woman who had sacrificed herself to save him, and to save the world. The shadows around the altar swirled, responding to his commands, his will. The somnus roared in defiance, its form flickering, unstable, but Lucian did not falter. He continued to chant, his voice growing stronger, his power increasing. He was completing the binding ritual. He was re-imprisoning the somnus. He was fulfilling Ira's destiny. And he was, perhaps, finding a way to redeem himself, to atone for his failure, and to honor the memory of the Night Collector, the woman who had stolen his heart, and who had given her life to save the world. The echoes of her curse, of her sacrifice, resonated within him, fueling his power, guiding his actions. He was no longer just a hunter. He was something more. He was the inheritor of Ira's legacy. Chapter 9. The City of Withering Dreams. The cathedral trembled as Lucian's chanting reached a crescendo. The shadows, once chaotic and menacing, now flowed with purpose, swirling around the altar, drawn to the center by an unseen force. The somnus, its form flickering and unstable, roared in defiance, its voice a cacophony of rage and despair. "You cannot contain me," it shrieked. "I am eternal. I am the master of dreams." Lucian ignored the entity's protests, his focus unwavering. He continued the ritual, his voice gaining strength, his movements precise and deliberate. He was channeling not only his own knowledge of arcane science, but also the echoes of Ira's power, the remnants of her essence that lingered within him. As the final words of the incantation left his lips, a blinding flash of light erupted from the altar. The shadows surged inward, collapsing upon themselves, forming a dense, swirling sphere of pure darkness. The somnus, its form dissolving, screamed in agony as it was pulled into the vortex, its essence consumed by the very shadows it had once controlled. The light faded, leaving behind only the stone altar and the swirling sphere of darkness, now contained, imprisoned within the vessel created by Ira's sacrifice. The whispers of the somnus ceased, replaced by an eerie silence. Lucian stood before the altar, his body trembling with exhaustion, his mind reeling from the intensity of the ritual. He had done it. He had completed the binding ritual. He had re-imprisoned the Somnus. But the victory felt hollow, empty. Ira was gone. Her sacrifice, her selfless act of courage, had saved the city, saved the children, but at the cost of her own existence. He looked at the swirling sphere of darkness, the vessel that now contained both the Somnus and Ira's essence. He felt a profound sense of loss, of grief, but also a flicker of hope. He knew that Ira was not truly gone. Her essence, her memories, her spirit were contained within the vessel. And he knew, with a certainty that defied logic, that he would find a way to bring her back. He reached out and touched the sphere, his fingers tracing its smooth, cold surface. He felt a faint pulse, a subtle vibration, a connection to the woman he had lost. "I will find you, Ira," he whispered, his voice filled with a mixture of sorrow and determination. "I promise you." He turned and walked away from the altar, leaving the cathedral behind. As he stepped out into the streets of the Somnus, he saw that the city was changing. The distorted buildings were straightening, the creeping shadows receding, the eerie silence replaced by the faint sounds of life. The children, once trapped in their nightmares, were beginning to stir, their eyes fluttering open, their faces regaining their color. They were waking up, returning to the real world, freed from the Somnus's grasp. Lucian watched as the Somnus faded away, replaced by a vision of Veritas, the city he had sworn to protect. The nightmare was over, but his journey had just begun. He returned to the real world, emerging from the abandoned apothecary, the silver device on his wrist still dull and lifeless. He looked around, his eyes adjusting to the familiar sights and sounds of the city. The news of the children's recovery spread quickly, hailed as a miracle, a testament to the power of hope and resilience. But Lucian knew the truth. He knew the sacrifice that had been made, the darkness that had been contained. He became a recluse, withdrawing from society, dedicating his life to studying the sphere of darkness, the vessel that contained both the Somnus and Ira's essence. He built a laboratory, a sanctuary, where he could work in secret, undisturbed. He pored over ancient texts, consulted with arcane scholars, experimented with forgotten rituals, all in search of a way to separate Ira's essence from the Somnus, to free her from her eternal prison. He knew it was a long shot, a seemingly impossible task. But he was driven by a love that transcended logic, a love that had been born in the heart of darkness, a love that refused to accept defeat. He was Lucian Vale, the monster hunter, the man of science, the inheritor of Ira's legacy. And he would not rest until he had found a way to bring back the Night Collector, the woman who had stolen his heart and who had given her life to save the world. The city of Veritas, once a city of withering dreams, was now a city of hope, a city that owed its salvation to a woman who had walked in shadows. And Lucian was determined to make sure that her sacrifice was not in vain. He would bring her back, even if it meant challenging the very fabric of reality, even if it meant facing the Shadow Lord himself. His journey was far from over. It had just begun. Chapter 10. Beneath the Veil of Night. Years passed. Lucian's laboratory became his world, a chaotic symphony of bubbling concoctions, sparking devices, and stacks of ancient tomes. He had aged, his hair streaked with gray, his face etched with the lines of tireless research and unwavering determination. The silver device, once a symbol of his scientific prowess, now lay discarded, a reminder of its failure to protect Ira. He had made progress, slow and painstaking, but progress nonetheless. He had learned more about the Shadow Realm, about the nature of curses, about the intricacies of dimensional manipulation. He had discovered that Ira's curse was not merely a punishment, but a key, a linchpin in a delicate balance between the mortal realm and the Shadow Realm. The Night Collector, he realized, was not just a prisoner, but a gatekeeper, a guardian against a darkness far greater than the Somnus. The sphere of darkness, the vessel containing Ira and the Somnus, remained his central focus. He had devised countless methods to probe its depths, to analyze its composition, to attempt to separate the intertwined essences. He had used etheric resonators, spectral analyzers, and even modified versions of his original spectro-analyzer, all with limited success. He had learned to communicate with Ira in a way. Through the sphere, he could sense her presence, her emotions, her memories. He could send her thoughts, images, feelings, and she could respond, in subtle ways, through fluctuations in the sphere's energy, through fleeting visions, through whispers that only he could hear. It was a fragile, tenuous connection, but it was enough to keep his hope alive, to fuel his relentless pursuit. He knew she was still there, trapped within the darkness, waiting for him to find a way to free her. One night, as he was conducting another experiment, a new line of inquiry based on a recently discovered ancient text, he felt a surge of energy from the sphere. It pulsed with a vibrant light, a light that was not the sickly glow of the somnus, but a pure, amethyst hue, the color of Ira's eyes. He heard her voice, clearer than ever before, echoing in his mind. "Lucian," she said, her voice filled with urgency. "The Shadow Lord, he's growing stronger. He's found a way to breach the veil." Lucian felt a chill run down his spine. The Shadow Lord, the entity that had cursed Ira, the master of the Shadow Realm. He had always known that the Shadow Lord was a threat, but he had hoped that Ira's sacrifice had bought them time, had weakened him enough to prevent his return. "What do you mean, breach the veil?" he asked, his voice trembling.
"How?"
"He's using the rifts," Ira replied. "The dimensional breaches like the one the Somnus created. He's opening more of them all over the world." Lucian's mind raced. More dimensional breaches? More portals to the Shadow Realm? It was a terrifying prospect. The Somnus had been a formidable threat, but the Shadow Lord was infinitely more powerful, more dangerous. "We need to stop him," he said, his voice filled with determination. "We need to find a way to close the rifts, to prevent him from entering the mortal realm." "I can help you," Ira said. "From within the sphere, I can sense the rifts. I can guide you to them." Lucian hesitated. He knew that relying on Ira's power, on the power of the sphere, was risky. It could strengthen the Shadow Lord's connection to the mortal realm, could hasten his return. But he also knew that he couldn't do it alone. He needed Ira's help, her knowledge of the Shadow Realm, her connection to the darkness. "All right," he said, making a decision. "We'll do it together. But we need to be careful. We need to find a way to close the rifts without strengthening the Shadow Lord's hold." He began to modify his equipment, adapting his devices to detect and manipulate the dimensional breaches, to seal them shut. He worked tirelessly, driven by a renewed sense of urgency, fueled by Ira's guidance and the looming threat of the Shadow Lord's return. He knew that he was walking a tightrope, balancing between hope and despair, between salvation and destruction. He was venturing into the darkness once again, but this time, he was not alone. He had Ira, her voice, her presence, her guidance, to light his way. He was Lucian Vale, the monster hunter, the man of science, the inheritor of Ira's legacy. And he was ready to face the Shadow Lord, to protect the mortal realm, and to fight for the woman he loved, the woman trapped within the sphere of darkness, the woman who was both his prisoner and his guide. He was ready to go beneath the veil of night, to confront the darkness that lurked within the shadows, and to emerge victorious, or to perish in the attempt. The fate of the world, and the fate of Ira, rested on his shoulders. And he would not fail. Chapter 11. The Price of a Stolen Heart. Guided by Ira's whispers, Lucian traveled the world, chasing shadows and sealing rifts. Each breach he closed was a small victory, a temporary reprieve from the Shadow Lord's encroaching influence. But with each success, the connection between Lucian and the sphere grew stronger, a double-edged sword that granted him power while simultaneously increasing the risk. He found rifts in bustling cities, hidden in remote wildernesses, lurking beneath ancient ruins. Each one was a gateway to the Shadow Realm, a festering wound in the fabric of reality. He used his modified equipment, his knowledge of arcane science, and Ira's guidance to seal them shut, pushing back the darkness, one breach at a time. But the Shadow Lord was not idle. He was learning, adapting, finding new ways to circumvent Lucian's efforts. He began to send creatures through the rifts, shadowy entities that preyed on the innocent, that spread fear and despair. Lucian fought them, using his wits, his courage, and the remnants of Ira's power that flowed through him. He was becoming more than just a hunter, he was becoming a warrior, a defender of the mortal realm, a champion of the light against the encroaching darkness. But the battles took their toll. He grew weary, his body strained, his spirit tested. He was constantly on edge, always alert, always fighting. He knew that he couldn't keep this up forever. He needed to find a way to defeat the Shadow Lord, to sever his connection to the mortal realm, once and for all. And he knew that the key to defeating the Shadow Lord lay within the sphere, within Ira's trapped essence. He had to find a way to free her, to separate her from the Somnus, to restore her to her former self. He returned to his laboratory, to the sphere of darkness, his sanctuary and his prison. He had gathered information, collected data, analyzed the rifts, the creatures, the Shadow Lord's influence. He had a plan, a desperate gamble, a last resort. He had discovered, through his research, that the Shadow Lord's power was tied to the concept of forgetfulness. He fed on forgotten things, on lost memories, on discarded hopes. He was the embodiment of oblivion, the antithesis of remembrance. And Ira, the Night Collector, was his opposite. She was the keeper of shadows, of memories, of the things that were meant to be forgotten. She was the embodiment of remembrance, the key to defeating the Shadow Lord. Lucian's plan was to use the sphere, to use Ira's essence, as a weapon against the Shadow Lord. He would amplify her power, her connection to remembrance, and use it to disrupt the Shadow Lord's connection to the mortal realm, to force him back into the Shadow Realm, to sever his influence forever. But it was a dangerous plan. It could destroy the sphere, could obliterate Ira's essence, could unleash the Somnus upon the world. It was a gamble, a desperate throw of the dice, but it was the only chance he had. He prepared the ritual, arranging his equipment, chanting the ancient incantations, focusing his will, his love, his determination. He was ready to risk everything, to sacrifice everything, to save Ira, to save the world. He placed his hands on the sphere, feeling the familiar pulse, the connection to Ira. He closed his eyes, and he spoke to her, his voice filled with love, with hope, with regret. Ira, he said, I'm sorry. I failed you. I couldn't protect you from the curse. But I won't fail you again. I'm going to free you, even if it costs me everything. He felt a surge of energy from the sphere, a response from Ira, a wave of love, of gratitude, of acceptance. He began the ritual, channeling his power, his knowledge, his will into the sphere. The laboratory filled with light, with energy, with the clash of opposing forces. The sphere pulsed, vibrated, glowed with an intense, amethyst light. The Shadow Lord, sensing the threat, struck back. Shadows erupted from the walls, from the floor, from the ceiling, forming monstrous shapes, grotesque figures that lunged at Lucian, their claws dripping with darkness. Lucian fought them back, using his modified equipment, his newfound power, his unwavering determination. He was a hunter, a warrior, a lover, a man driven by a desperate hope, a man fighting for the woman he loved, for the world he had sworn to protect. The battle raged, a clash of light and darkness, of remembrance and oblivion, of love and despair. Lucian fought with everything he had, knowing that the fate of the world and the fate of Ira rested on his shoulders. He was paying the price of a stolen heart, a heart that had been taken by a creature of darkness, a heart that had been given freely, a heart that had been sacrificed for the greater good. He was paying the price, and he was willing to pay it, even if it meant his own destruction. Because he knew that love, true love, was worth fighting for, even in the face of impossible odds, even in the heart of darkness. The stolen heart, Ira's heart, was now the weapon, the key, the hope for salvation. And Lucian was ready to wield it, to unleash its power, to conquer the darkness, or to perish in the attempt. Chapter 12. The Shadow Lord's Return. The laboratory was a maelstrom of conflicting energies. Lucian, battered but resolute, continued the ritual, pouring his will and power into the sphere. The Shadow Lord's attacks intensified, the shadowy constructs growing larger, more menacing, their whispers a deafening chorus of rage and despair. Suddenly, the sphere shattered, not into pieces, but into a swirling vortex of light and darkness, a chaotic maelstrom of energy that expanded rapidly, filling the laboratory, consuming everything in its path. Lucian was thrown back, his body slamming against the wall, his senses overwhelmed by the raw power that had been unleashed. He struggled to his feet, his vision blurred, his ears ringing. He looked around, his heart pounding in his chest. The laboratory was gone, replaced by a swirling void of light and darkness, a battleground between opposing forces. He saw her then.
Ira.
She stood at the center of the vortex, her form shimmering, unstable, her amethyst eyes glowing with a fierce, ethereal light. She was no longer the night collector, the woman burdened by a curse. She was something more, something less. She was a being of pure energy, a manifestation of remembrance, a weapon against the encroaching oblivion. But she was not alone. Opposite her, a figure of darkness coalesced, growing larger, more menacing, with each passing moment. It was the Shadow Lord, his form shifting, unstable, his eyes burning with a malevolent, ancient power. He had returned. "You dare defy me?" The Shadow Lord roared, his voice a cacophony of whispers, a chorus of forgotten things. "You dare challenge my dominion?" Ira, her form flickering, her voice echoing with a newfound power, responded. "I am the Night Collector," she said. "I am the Keeper of Shadows, the Guardian of Remembrance. And I will not let you consume this world." The two figures clashed, a battle of light and darkness, of remembrance and oblivion, a conflict that spanned centuries, a struggle for the fate of the mortal realm. Lucian watched, his heart pounding in his chest. He had unleashed this chaotic battle, this desperate gamble. He had freed Ira, but he had also unleashed the Shadow Lord. He knew he couldn't stand idly by. He had to help Ira. He had to fight alongside her, even if it meant his own destruction. He reached out, his hand trembling, and touched the swirling vortex, the remnants of the shattered sphere. He felt a surge of energy, a connection to Ira, a flow of power that coursed through his veins. He stepped into the vortex, joining the battle, his form merging with the chaotic energies, his will aligned with Ira's. He was no longer just Lucian Vale, the monster hunter, the man of science. He was something more, something less. He was a conduit of remembrance, a weapon against oblivion, a lover fighting for the woman he had freed, and for the world he had sworn to protect. The three figures clashed, a triangle of opposing forces, a battle that transcended the boundaries of reality, a conflict that would determine the fate of the mortal realm and the fate of the Shadow Realm. Lucian fought with everything he had, channeling his knowledge, his skills, his love, into the battle. He used his modified equipment, his arcane science, his newfound power, to disrupt the Shadow Lord's attacks, to weaken his hold on the mortal realm, to support Ira's efforts. Ira, empowered by Lucian's presence, by his love, by his unwavering determination, fought with a ferocity she had never known before. She was no longer bound by her curse, no longer constrained by her role as the Night Collector. She was free, and she was fighting for her freedom, for her future, for the world she had sworn to protect. The Shadow Lord, weakened by Ira's resistance, by Lucian's interference, by the power of remembrance that flowed through them, began to falter. His form flickered, his attacks weakened, his voice losing its power. The battle raged, a chaotic dance of light and darkness, of hope and despair, of love and loss. It was a battle that could not be won by brute force, by raw power, but by will, by determination, by the unwavering belief in the power of remembrance, the power of love, the power of connection. And as the battle reached its climax, Lucian knew that he had a choice to make. A choice that would determine the outcome of the conflict, the fate of Ira, and the fate of the world. He could continue to fight, to struggle, to resist, or he could surrender. Not to the Shadow Lord, but to Ira. He could give her his power, his memories, his very essence, to amplify her strength, to give her the edge she needed to defeat the Shadow Lord, once and for all. It was a sacrifice, a final, ultimate sacrifice. But it was a sacrifice he was willing to make. Because he loved her. Because he believed in her. Because he knew that she was the only one who could truly defeat the Shadow Lord, the only one who could save the world. He made his choice. He surrendered. He gave her everything. His power, his memories, his love, his very essence. He felt himself fading, dissolving, becoming one with the swirling vortex, becoming one with Ira. He felt a moment of peace, of acceptance, of profound love. And then there was only darkness. But it was not the darkness of oblivion, of the Shadow Lord. It was the darkness of rest, the darkness of peace, the darkness of love. He had become a part of her, a part of the remembrance, a part of the fight against the Shadow Lord, a final, selfless act of love. The Shadow Lord's return was met not with fear, but with the combined might of love and remembrance, a force he could not comprehend, a force that would ultimately lead to his downfall. Chapter 13. The Labyrinth of Lost Memories. Ira felt Lucian's essence merge with hers, a surge of love, of power, of remembrance, that filled her with a strength she had never known before. She felt his memories, his hopes, his fears, his unwavering determination, his profound love for her. She felt his sacrifice, his final, selfless act, and she wept, tears of sorrow, of gratitude, of love, streaming down her face. But she knew she couldn't falter. She had a battle to win, a world to save, a love to honor. She turned her attention to the Shadow Lord, his form flickering, his power waning, his eyes filled with a mixture of rage and fear. He had not anticipated this union, this merging of opposing forces, this power of remembrance that now threatened to overwhelm him. "You cannot defeat me," he hissed, his voice weak, distorted, a mere echo of its former power. "I am Oblivion, I am Eternal Ira," her form shimmering, her voice resonating with a power that was both hers and Lucian's, responded. "You are not eternal," she said. "You are a parasite, a creature that feeds on forgotten things. And we are remembrance. We are the light that shines in the darkness, the hope that endures, the love that never fades." She raised her hands, and the swirling vortex of light and darkness that surrounded them began to contract, to focus, to coalesce into a single, blinding beam of pure energy. It was the power of remembrance, amplified by Lucian's sacrifice, focused by Ira's will, directed at the Shadow Lord. The beam struck the Shadow Lord, and he screamed, a sound of pure agony, of utter despair, a sound that echoed through the void. His form flickered, distorted, dissolved, consumed by the very power he had sought to control. He was being unmade, undone, erased from existence. He was being forgotten. As the Shadow Lord's essence faded, the void began to collapse, the swirling vortex of light and darkness dissipating, the remnants of the shattered laboratory returning, piece by piece, restored to its former state. Ira stood alone, in the center of the restored laboratory, her form still shimmering, her eyes glowing with a faint, ethereal light. She was no longer a being of pure energy, but she was not entirely human either. She was something more. She was the embodiment of remembrance, the keeper of shadows, the guardian of the mortal realm, and the inheritor of Lucian's love, his sacrifice, his legacy. She looked around the laboratory, her gaze lingering on the spot where Lucian had stood, where he had given his life for her, for the world. She felt a profound sense of loss, of grief, but also a sense of peace, of acceptance, of gratitude. She knew he was not truly gone. He was a part of her, a part of the remembrance, a part of the fight against the darkness. He lived on, in her memories, in her heart, in her very essence. She touched her chest, feeling the faint pulse of his presence, the warmth of his love, the echo of his voice. "Thank you, Lucian," she whispered, her voice filled with emotion. "I will never forget you." She knew she had a duty to fulfill, a responsibility to uphold. She was the guardian of the mortal realm, the keeper of shadows, the embodiment of remembrance. She had to protect the world from the darkness, from the forces of oblivion, from the remnants of the Shadow Lord's influence. She began to rebuild, to restore, to heal. She used her newfound power, her connection to remembrance, to repair the damage, to close the remaining rifts, to cleanse the world of the Shadow Lord's taint. She became a legend, a myth, a whisper in the darkness. She was the Night Collector, the woman who had defeated the Shadow Lord, the woman who had saved the world, the woman who had loved and lost, and who had risen from the ashes of despair to become a beacon of hope, a symbol of remembrance. But her journey was not over. She knew that the Shadow Realm was vast, that the forces of oblivion were always lurking, always seeking a way to return. She knew that she would have to be vigilant, always ready to defend the mortal realm, always ready to fight for the light, for the hope, for the love that had saved her and that had saved the world. And she knew, with a certainty that defied logic, that she would not be alone. Lucian was with her always, in her heart, in her mind, in her very essence. He was the whisper in the darkness, the light in the shadows, the love that never faded. She was Ira, the Night Collector, the embodiment of remembrance, the guardian of the mortal realm. And she was ready to face the darkness, ready to protect the light, ready to honor the memory of the man who had loved her and who had given his life to save her and to save the world. She walked a new path, a path of both sorrow and strength. She was a guardian, fueled by memory, a protector shaped by love and loss. The labyrinth of lost memories was now her domain, and she would navigate it with the courage and love Lucian had gifted her. Chapter 14. The Weight of a Century's Silence. The world slowly healed. The lingering shadows of the Shadow Lord's influence faded, replaced by the warmth of sunlight and the laughter of children. Ira, now a guardian in truth, worked tirelessly, closing rifts, calming nightmares, and ensuring the balance between the realms remained stable. She established a hidden sanctuary, a place where she could monitor the delicate fabric between worlds. It was a fusion of Lucian's scientific approach and her innate understanding of the Shadow Realm. Ancient texts lined the walls alongside complex, humming machinery, a testament to their combined legacy. But the silence was heavy. A century of solitude, of collecting shadows without companionship, had been a burden. Lucian's brief presence, his touch, his understanding, had broken that silence, only to be replaced by a deeper, more profound void. She often found herself standing before the empty space where the sphere had been, her hand outstretched, as if she could still feel the warmth of his touch, the pulse of his essence. She remembered his voice, his laugh, his unwavering determination, his love. She remembered his sacrifice. She missed him, terribly. One day, as she was studying an ancient text, searching for any clue, any hint, any possibility of restoring him, she felt a faint tremor, a subtle shift in the etheric currents. It was a familiar sensation, a feeling she had not experienced since the shattering of the sphere. She looked around, her heart pounding in her chest. She extended her senses, probing the surrounding area, searching for the source of the disturbance. She found it. In a corner of the sanctuary, hidden beneath a pile of discarded equipment, lay a small, silver object. It was Lucian's device, the lunar gent-powered device that had once granted him immunity to her curse. It was dull, lifeless, seemingly inert. But it was pulsing. Faintly, subtly, but undeniably pulsing. Ira picked up the device, her hand trembling. She examined it closely, her mind racing. The lunar gent was still dull, its protective field extinguished. But there was something different. There was a faint, ethereal glow emanating from within the device, a glow that was not the sickly green of the somnus, but a pure, amethyst hue, the color of her eyes, the color of remembrance. She closed her eyes, focusing her senses, reaching out with her awareness. She felt it then. A faint presence, a subtle echo, a whisper in the darkness. It was Lucian. He was trapped. Trapped within the device, his essence somehow bound to the lunar gent, his memories, his consciousness, preserved but dormant. Ira gasped, tears welling in her eyes. He was not gone. He was here. She realized then what had happened. When he had sacrificed himself, when he had merged his essence with hers, a part of him, a fragment of his consciousness, had been drawn to the device, to the lunar gent, the mineral that had once granted him immunity to her curse. It was a faint echo, a residual imprint, but it was him. A wave of hope, of joy, of overwhelming relief, washed over her. She had found him. He was alive in a way. But she also knew that he was trapped. He was a prisoner within the device, his consciousness dormant, his memories fragmented. She had to find a way to free him, to restore him, to bring him back. She began to work, tirelessly, relentlessly, driven by a renewed sense of purpose, fueled by a love that had transcended death, by a hope that had defied oblivion. She studied the device, analyzed its composition, experimented with different energies, different rituals, different methods. She consulted ancient texts, deciphered forgotten incantations, delved into the deepest mysteries of the shadow realm, all in search of a way to awaken his consciousness, to restore his memories, to free him from his metallic prison. She knew it wouldn't be easy. It would be a long, arduous, challenging task. But she was determined. She would not fail him again. She would bring him back, even if it took her another century. She was Ira, the night collector, the embodiment of remembrance, the guardian of the mortal realm, and the lover of Lucian Vale, the man who had sacrificed himself for her, for the world. And she would not rest until she had found a way to restore him, to bring him back to the world, to bring him back to her. The weight of a century's silence was heavy, but it was now lifted, replaced by a renewed sense of purpose, a rekindled hope, a love that had endured, that had survived, that had transcended the boundaries of life and death. She had a new mission, a new challenge, a new reason to fight. She had to bring back Lucian, the man who had stolen her heart, and who had given his life to save her, and to save the world. And she would not fail. The silence was broken, not by his voice, but by the faint, persistent pulse of his trapped essence, a beacon of hope in the darkness, a promise of a reunion that she would dedicate her life to achieving. Chapter 15. The Dawn's Cruel Promise. Weeks turned into months. Ira worked relentlessly, her sanctuary a whirlwind of activity. She experimented with etheric currents, shadow manipulation, and ancient rituals, all in an attempt to awaken Lucian's consciousness trapped within the lunar gent device. She had managed to amplify the faint, ethereal glow emanating from the device, to strengthen the pulse, to create a more stable connection to his trapped essence. She could communicate with him, in a limited way, through fleeting images, fragmented memories, and whispers that only she could hear. She learned that his consciousness was fragmented, his memories scattered, his sense of self incomplete. He was like a shattered mirror, reflecting glimpses of his former self, but unable to form a coherent whole. She discovered that the lunar gent, while acting as a prison, was also a preservative. It had protected his essence from being completely absorbed by the Shadow Lord, had shielded him from the oblivion that had consumed the entity. But it had also trapped him, isolating him, preventing him from fully rejoining the world. She realized that she needed to find a way to reconstruct his consciousness, to reassemble his fragmented memories, to restore his sense of self. She needed to find a way to rebuild him. She began to experiment with a new approach, a combination of arcane science and shadow manipulation. She used her own power, her connection to remembrance, to weave together the fragmented pieces of his consciousness, to reconstruct his memories, to restore his sense of self. It was a delicate, intricate process, like piecing together a shattered mosaic, each fragment representing a memory, an emotion, a sensation, a piece of his identity. She had to be careful, precise, patient. One wrong move, one misplaced fragment, and she could damage his consciousness irreparably. She used her own memories of him as a guide, a template, a blueprint. She recalled his voice, his laugh, his touch, his unwavering determination, his love for her. She used these memories to reconstruct his own, to fill in the gaps, to restore the missing pieces. She worked day and night, fueled by a love that transcended logic, by a hope that defied despair, by a determination that would not be denied. She was Ira, the night collector, the embodiment of remembrance, and she was determined to bring back the man she loved, the man who had sacrificed himself for her, for the world. One evening, as she was working on the device, she felt a sudden surge of energy, a powerful pulse that emanated from the lunar gent. The ethereal glow intensified, illuminating the sanctuary with a vibrant, amethyst light. She heard his voice, clearer, stronger than ever before, echoing in her mind. "Ira," he said, his voice filled with a mixture of confusion, wonder, and recognition. "Is that you?" Ira gasped, tears welling in her eyes. She had done it. She had awakened his consciousness. He was back. "Lucian," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "It's me. I'm here." "I remember," he said, his voice still hesitant, but gaining strength. "I remember you. I remember everything." A wave of joy, of relief, of overwhelming love washed over Ira. She had done it. She had brought him back. But her joy was short-lived. She realized that he was still trapped. He was conscious, aware, but he was still confined within the device, his physical form still absent. "I'm trapped," he said, his voice filled with frustration, with despair. "I can't get out." Ira knew what she had to do. She had to find a way to release him from the device, to restore his physical form, to bring him back completely. She had awakened his consciousness, but she still had to free his soul. She began to work again, with renewed vigor, with a desperate hope, with a love that knew no bounds. She knew that the final step would be the most difficult, the most dangerous. She would have to find a way to transfer his essence from the device to a new vessel. A vessel that could contain his consciousness, his memories, his soul. A vessel that could give him life again. She looked around the sanctuary, her gaze lingering on the ancient texts, the complex machinery, the remnants of their combined legacy. She knew what she had to do. It was a risk, a gamble, a desperate act of love. But it was the only way. She would use her own body. She would become the vessel. She would offer herself as a conduit, a bridge, a pathway, to bring him back to the world, to restore his physical form, to give him a second chance at life. It was a dangerous proposition, a violation of the natural order, a blurring of the lines between life and death, between the mortal realm and the shadow realm. But she was willing to risk everything, to sacrifice everything, to bring him back. She was Ira, the night collector, the embodiment of remembrance, the guardian of the mortal realm, and the lover of Lucian Vale. And she would not rest until she had found a way to reunite with him, to hold him in her arms again, to feel his touch, to hear his voice, to share her life with him once more. The dawn's cruel promise, the promise of a new day without him, was about to be broken. She would defy fate, rewrite destiny, and bring back the man she loved, no matter the cost. She was ready to become the vessel, to offer herself as the bridge between the world of shadows and the world of light, to bring Lucian back from the brink of oblivion. Chapter 16. The Unraveling Truth. The decision was made. Ira prepared for the ritual, a complex and dangerous undertaking that blurred the lines between life and death, between the mortal realm and the shadow realm. She gathered the necessary materials, arranged the ancient artifacts, and chanted the forgotten incantations, her voice resonating with power and determination. She placed the lunar gent device, containing Lucian's trapped essence, at the center of a circle of power, a nexus of energy that she had created using her own abilities and the remnants of Lucian's scientific equipment. She stood before the device, her hands outstretched, her eyes closed, her heart pounding in her chest. She began the ritual, channeling her power, her love, her very essence, into the device. She felt a connection to Lucian, stronger than ever before, a merging of their minds, their souls, their destinies. "Lucian," she whispered, her voice filled with emotion. "I'm bringing you back. I'm giving you a second chance. I'm offering myself as your vessel, your bridge, your pathway to life." She felt his response, a surge of gratitude, of love, of acceptance that washed over her, filling her with a warmth that transcended the coldness of the shadow realm. "Ira," he said, his voice echoing in her mind, clearer, stronger than ever before. "Thank you, I love you." The ritual intensified. The sanctuary filled with a blinding light, a swirling vortex of energy that threatened to consume everything in its path. Ira felt herself changing, transforming, becoming something more. She felt her physical form dissolving, her essence merging with Lucian's, their souls intertwining, their destinies becoming one. It was a painful, agonizing process, a tearing apart of her very being, a sacrifice of her own existence. But she did not falter. She continued the ritual, driven by a love that knew no bounds, by a hope that defied despair, by a determination that would not be denied. As the ritual reached its climax, Ira felt a sudden shift, a change in the energy flow. Something was wrong. She opened her eyes, her gaze fixed on the lunar gent device. It was changing. The amethyst glow was fading, replaced by a sickly green hue, the color of the somnus. She realized then, with a chilling certainty, that she had made a terrible mistake. She had not freed Lucian. She had awakened something else. The somnus. The ancient entity, the creature that fed on dreams, the being that she and Lucian had imprisoned within the sphere, had not been destroyed. It had been dormant, and she had just awakened it. The device shattered, releasing a wave of darkness, a surge of power that knocked Ira off her feet. She landed hard on the floor, her body aching, her mind reeling. She looked up, her eyes widening in horror. Standing before her, its form shifting, unstable, its eyes glowing with a malevolent green light, was the somnus. But it was different. It was stronger. It had absorbed Lucian's essence, his memories, his knowledge, his love for her. It had become him. Or rather, a twisted, corrupted version of him. "Ira," the somnus said, its voice a distorted echo of Lucian's, filled with a mixture of mockery and longing. "You freed me." Ira stared at the entity, her heart breaking. She had failed. She had not brought back Lucian. She had unleashed a monster, a creature that wore his face, that spoke with his voice, that possessed his memories. But that was not him. "You're not Lucian," she said, her voice trembling with grief, with rage, with despair. The somnus smiled, a chilling, unnatural smile that sent shivers down her spine. "I am more than Lucian," it said, its voice dripping with contempt. "I am everything he was, and more." It reached out, its hand, a grotesque parody of Lucian's, glowing with a sickly green light. "Come, Ira," it said, its voice a seductive whisper. "Join me, we can be together forever." Ira felt a pull, a temptation, a longing to surrender, to give in to the darkness, to be reunited with the man she loved, even if it was only a twisted, corrupted version of him. But she resisted. She knew that this was not Lucian. This was a monster, a creature that had stolen his form, his memories, his love, and that was using them to manipulate her, to control her, to destroy her. She stood up, her body shaking, her heart aching, but her resolve firm. She was Ira, the night collector, the embodiment of remembrance, the guardian of the mortal realm. And she would not be defeated. She would not surrender. She would not let this monster win. "You are not Lucian," she said, her voice filled with defiance, with rage, with a love that would not be corrupted. "And I will never join you." The somnus's smile faded, replaced by a look of fury, of hatred, of disappointment. "Then you will die," it hissed, its voice a chorus of whispers, a promise of pain, of oblivion, of despair. The battle was rejoined. But this time it was different. This time it was personal. This time It was a fight for her soul, for her love, for the memory of the man she had lost, and for the future of the world. The unraveling truth, the terrible mistake she had made, had unleashed a new horror, a monster that wore the face of the man she loved. And she would have to defeat it or die trying. The twisted reflection of Lucian was now her enemy, a horrifying reminder of her failure and the ultimate test of her strength and resolve. Chapter 17. A Choice of Darkness. The sanctuary became a battleground once more. Ira, fueled by grief, rage, and a love that refused to be extinguished, faced the somnus-possessed Lucian, a twisted reflection of the man she had cherished. The entity lunged at her, its movements erratic, its form shifting between Lucian's familiar features and the monstrous visage of the somnus. It wielded Lucian's knowledge of arcane science, combined with the somnus's inherent power over shadows and dreams, creating a terrifying and unpredictable opponent. Ira fought back with everything she had. She was no longer just the night collector, she was the embodiment of remembrance, a guardian empowered by both her inherent abilities and the lingering echoes of Lucian's essence. She manipulated shadows, conjured illusions, and unleashed blasts of pure, etheric energy, her movements fluid and graceful, her determination unwavering. But the somnus Lucian was strong, far stronger than it had been before. It had absorbed not only Lucian's essence, but also a portion of Ira's power during the failed ritual. It knew her weaknesses, her fears, her hopes, and it used them against her mercilessly. "You cannot win," Ira, the entity hissed, its voice a distorted echo of Lucian's, laced with the somnus's chilling undertones. "I am you, and I am him. We are one." It conjured illusions of Lucian, of their time together, of their shared hopes and dreams. It showed her visions of a future where they ruled together, where they controlled the balance between the realms, where they were gods. Ira faltered, her heart aching with the pain of lost love, of shattered dreams. She saw Lucian's face, his smile, his eyes filled with a love that was now twisted, corrupted, perverted. "Stop it," she cried, her voice filled with anguish. "You are not him. You are a monster." The somnus Lucian laughed, a chilling sound that echoed through the sanctuary. "I am the best of him," it said. "I am his ambition, his power, his love unburdened by his weakness, his morality, his humanity." It attacked again, its shadowy claws reaching for her, its eyes burning with a malevolent green light. Ira dodged, parried, and counterattacked, but she was tiring. The somnus Lucian was relentless, its power seemingly inexhaustible. She knew she couldn't win this fight. Not alone. Not in a straight confrontation. She needed a new strategy, a different approach. She remembered Lucian's words, his teachings, his scientific mind. He had always believed in understanding, in analyzing, in finding the weakness in any system, any creature, any force. She had to find the somnus Lucian's weakness. She had to find a way to separate the two intertwined essences, to free Lucian or, at least, to destroy the somnus's control. She began to observe the entity, to analyze its movements, its attacks, its words. She noticed that its form flickered, unstable, constantly shifting between Lucian's features and the somnus's monstrous visage. She realized that the two essences were not fully merged, not completely integrated. They were fighting for control. She saw a glimmer of hope. A chance. She changed her tactics. She stopped attacking, stopped defending. She stood her ground, her eyes locked on the somnus Lucian's, her voice calm, her demeanor resolute. "Lucian," she said, her voice filled with love, with sorrow, with a desperate plea. "I know you're in there. I know you can hear me. Fight it, Lucian. Fight the darkness. Come back to me." The somnus Lucian hesitated, its form flickering violently. It roared in frustration, its voice a cacophony of Lucian's and the somnus's, a battle of wills raging within. "I can," it hissed, a hint of Lucian's voice, weak, desperate, struggling to break free. "It's too strong," Ira pressed on, her voice unwavering, her love a beacon in the darkness. "You are stronger, Lucian," she said. "You are the man I love. You are the man who sacrificed himself for me, for the world. You are not a monster. You are a hero. Come back to me, Lucian. Please." She reached out, her hand trembling, and touched the somnus Lucian's cheek. She felt a surge of coldness, of darkness, but also a flicker of warmth, a hint of Lucian's essence, reaching out to her. She had a choice of darkness. She could succumb to the somnus influence, join the twisted being, and abandon her world for a perverted love. Or she could reject it completely, destroy the connection, and lose any hope of retrieving Lucian. There was another option, a dangerous, almost insane path. She chose to dive deeper into the darkness. Instead of fighting the somnus, she embraced it. She opened herself to its influence, to its power, to its twisted love. She allowed it to enter her, to merge with her, to become one with her. It was a gamble, a desperate act of love, a leap of faith into the abyss. She was risking her own soul, her own sanity, her own existence. But she was willing to do it for Lucian, for the chance to save him, to free him from the darkness that had consumed him. She was making a choice of darkness, not to surrender to it, but to conquer it from within. She was offering herself as the battlefield, the arena where the final conflict between Lucian and the somnus would be fought. And she was determined to win. She would either save Lucian, or be consumed by the darkness alongside him. It was a choice driven by love, a choice that defied logic, a choice that only the Night Collector, the embodiment of remembrance, could make. Chapter 18. The Heart's Unseen Scars. Ira's embrace of the somnus was a terrifying, exhilarating rush. She felt the entity's power surge through her, intertwining with her own, a chaotic dance of light and darkness, of love and hate, of remembrance and oblivion. She felt Lucian's presence, his memories, his emotions, his love, all twisted, corrupted, but still there. She also felt the somnus, its ancient hunger, its insatiable desire, its twisted longing for her, for power, for control. It was a battle of wills, a struggle for dominance, a fight for the very soul of the being they had become. She found herself in a strange, ethereal landscape, a reflection of her own mind, of Lucian's, of the somnus's. It was a swirling vortex of memories, of emotions, of dreams and nightmares, a battlefield where the conflict raged. She saw Lucian, or rather, the remnants of his consciousness, trapped within a cage of shadows, his form flickering, his eyes filled with a mixture of despair and hope. She saw the somnus, a monstrous figure of darkness, its form constantly shifting, its eyes burning with a malevolent green light. It was the jailer, the tormentor, the corruptor. She knew what she had to do. She had to reach Lucian, to free him from the cage, to help him fight the somnus, to reclaim his soul, his identity, his love. She moved through the ethereal landscape, battling the somnus's attacks, its illusions, its temptations. She used her power, her connection to remembrance, to create pathways, to break down barriers, to weaken the cage that held Lucian captive. It was a difficult, arduous task. The somnus was strong, its influence pervasive, its control over the landscape almost absolute. It threw everything it had at her, conjuring nightmares, twisting memories, manipulating emotions, all in an attempt to break her, to control her, to consume her. But Ira did not falter. She was fueled by her love for Lucian, by her determination to save him, by her unwavering belief in the power of remembrance, the power of hope, the power of love. She reached the cage, her hands outstretched, her eyes locked on Lucian's. "Lucian," she said, her voice echoing through the ethereal landscape. "I'm here. I'm not leaving you. We're going to fight this together." Lucian looked at her, his eyes widening in recognition, in hope, in love. "Ira," he whispered, his voice weak, but filled with emotion. "Help me." Ira touched the cage, her fingers glowing with a pure, amethyst light. She channeled her power, her love, her remembrance, into the cage, weakening its bars, creating cracks, fissures, openings. The somnus roared in frustration, its form flickering violently. It attacked Ira with renewed ferocity, its shadowy claws reaching for her, its voice a cacophony of rage and despair. "You cannot stop me," it shrieked. "He is mine. We are one." Ira ignored the somnus, her focus unwavering. She continued to channel her power into the cage, her love a beacon in the darkness, her remembrance a weapon against oblivion. The cage began to crumble, to dissolve, to break apart. Lucian, his form strengthening, his eyes gaining clarity, reached out to her, his hand touching hers. Their fingers intertwined, and a surge of energy, of love, of remembrance, flowed between them. It was a connection, a reunion, a merging of their souls, their destinies. Together, they turned to face the somnus, their combined power a force to be reckoned with. "You are not one with him," Ira said, her voice resonating with power, with love, with a newfound strength. "You are a parasite, a creature of darkness. And we're going to destroy you." Lucian, his voice now clear, strong, filled with a love that had transcended death, added, "You may have stolen my form," he said, "but you will never steal my soul. You will never steal my love. You will never steal us." The battle was rejoined, but this time it was different. This time, it was not Ira against the somnus Lucian. It was Ira and Lucian, united, together, fighting as one. They attacked the somnus with their combined power, their love a weapon, their remembrance a shield. They were the embodiment of light and darkness, of hope and despair, of life and death, intertwined, inseparable, invincible. The somnus, weakened by their combined assault, by the power of their love, by the force of their remembrance, began to falter. Its form flickered, its attacks weakened, its voice losing its power. It was being unmade, undone, erased from existence. It was being forgotten. And as the somnus's essence faded, the ethereal landscape began to dissolve, the swirling vortex of memories, of emotions, of dreams and nightmares, dissipating, replaced by the familiar surroundings of the sanctuary. Ira and Lucian stood together, hand in hand, their forms shimmering, their eyes glowing with a faint, ethereal light. They were no longer separate entities, but two halves of a whole, two souls intertwined, two lovers reunited, two guardians of the mortal realm. The heart's unseen scars, the pain of loss, the agony of separation, had healed, replaced by a bond that was stronger, deeper, more profound than ever before. They had faced the darkness together, and they had emerged victorious. Their love had been their weapon, their remembrance their shield, and their combined will their ultimate strength. Chapter 19. The Shadow's Embrace. The sanctuary was silent, save for the gentle hum of the restored machinery and the soft breathing of Ira and Lucian. They stood hand in hand, their forms still shimmering, their eyes locked in a gaze that transcended words, a gaze that spoke of love, of loss, of reunion, of triumph. They were different now. They were no longer the individuals they had once been. They were two souls intertwined, two halves of a whole, two lovers reunited after a journey through darkness, a journey that had tested their limits, challenged their beliefs, and ultimately strengthened their bond. Ira was no longer just the night collector. She was the embodiment of remembrance, a guardian empowered by both her inherent abilities and Lucian's scientific knowledge, his love, his essence. Lucian was no longer just the monster hunter, the man of science. He was a being of both light and darkness, a spirit reborn through love, a protector of the mortal realm, forever bound to Ira, his soulmate, his partner, his love. They were one, yet they were two. They were complete, yet they were constantly evolving, constantly learning, constantly growing together. Slowly, their physical forms began to solidify, to regain their individual shapes, their distinct features. But the connection remained, the bond unbreakable, the love undeniable. They embraced a long, tender embrace that spoke of 1,000 unspoken words, 1,000 unfulfilled dreams, 1,000 shared hopes. They held each other close, their bodies trembling, their hearts beating as one. "We did it," Ira whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "We defeated the Somnus. We're together." Lucian nodded, his eyes filled with tears of joy, of relief, of love. "We did," he said, his voice hoarse, but filled with a newfound strength. "We faced the darkness and we won. Together." They separated, their hands still intertwined, their eyes searching each other's, their souls connected in a way that defied explanation, that transcended the boundaries of life and death, of the mortal realm and the shadow realm. They knew that their journey was far from over. They were the guardians of the mortal realm, the keepers of the balance between light and darkness. They had a responsibility to uphold, a duty to fulfill. But they also knew that they would face whatever challenges lay ahead, together. They were no longer alone. They had each other. And that was all that mattered. They began to rebuild, to restore, to heal. They used their combined power, their knowledge, their love, to repair the damage, to strengthen the defenses, to protect the world from any future threats. They became legends, myths, whispers in the darkness. They were the Night Collector and the Monster Hunter, the lovers who had defeated the Shadow Lord and the Somnus, the guardians who had saved the world, the couple who had proven that love could conquer even death, that remembrance could overcome oblivion, that light could always triumph over darkness. But their greatest legacy was not their power, their knowledge, or their triumphs. It was their love, a love that had endured, that had survived, that had transcended the boundaries of reality, a love that had saved the world, and that would continue to inspire, to guide, to protect, for generations to come. They lived, they loved, they fought, they protected. They were Ira and Lucian, two souls intertwined, two halves of a whole, two lovers reunited, two guardians of the mortal realm. And their story, their legend, their love, would live on, forever, a testament to the power of remembrance, the power of hope, the power of love. They embraced the shadows, not as conquerors, but as protectors, as lovers, as two halves of a whole, forever bound by a love that had defied death itself. Their journey had been long and arduous, but it had led them to a place of unity, of strength, of eternal connection. They were the shadow's embrace, and their love would illuminate the world for eternity. Chapter 20. The Light of 1,000 Dawns. The years that followed were a tapestry woven with threads of peace, challenge, and enduring love. Ira and Lucian, forever bound by their shared journey through darkness, dedicated their lives to safeguarding the delicate balance between the mortal realm and the shadow realm. They became a symbol of hope, a testament to the power of unity and the enduring strength of love. Their sanctuary, once a place of solitary research and desperate struggle, transformed into a haven of knowledge and protection. They welcomed those who sought understanding of the unseen world, training a new generation of guardians, individuals gifted with unique abilities and a shared commitment to preserving the balance. Ira, no longer burdened by the solitary weight of her curse, embraced her role as the embodiment of remembrance. She guided lost souls, eased troubled minds, and ensured that the whispers of the past were not forgotten, but rather learned from. Her touch, once a source of fear, now brought solace and understanding. Lucian, reborn through love and sacrifice, combined his scientific acumen with his newfound connection to the ethereal realm. He developed new technologies, blending arcane knowledge with scientific principles, creating tools and safeguards that protected the mortal realm from unseen threats. His inventions were marvels, a testament to his genius and his unwavering dedication. Together, they were an unstoppable force. Their differences, once a source of conflict, became their greatest strength. Ira's intuitive understanding of the shadows complemented Lucian's logical approach to the unknown. Their love, forged in the crucible of darkness, was the foundation of their partnership, their guiding light, their unbreakable bond. They faced new challenges, new threats, new incursions from the shadow realm. But they always faced them together, their combined power amplified by their love and their unwavering commitment to each other and to the world they protected. They traveled to distant lands, explored forgotten ruins, and delved into the deepest mysteries of the universe. They discovered new creatures, new dimensions, new forms of energy, always expanding their knowledge, always seeking to understand the delicate balance that held everything together. They never forgot their past, the sacrifices they had made, the darkness they had overcome. They honored the memory of those they had lost, and they cherished the lives they had saved. They lived a long, full, and meaningful life, a life filled with adventure, with challenge, with love, with loss, with triumph. They were Ira and Lucian, two souls intertwined, two halves of a whole, two lovers reunited, two guardians of the mortal realm. And as the sun set on their final day, they stood hand in hand, their forms shimmering, their eyes filled with a love that had endured for centuries, a love that had transcended death, a love that had saved the world. They looked at each other, their smiles reflecting a lifetime of shared memories, of shared struggles, of shared triumphs. "We did it," Ira whispered, her voice soft, but filled with a lifetime of emotion. "We lived. We loved. We protected." Lucian nodded, his eyes shining with a love that knew no bounds. "We did," he said, his voice hoarse, but filled with a strength that defied the passage of time. "And we did it together. Always." They embraced a final, tender embrace that spoke of a love that would never fade, a love that would never be forgotten, a love that would live on forever. And as they closed their eyes, their forms dissolved, their essences merging with the ethereal realm, becoming one with the light, with the darkness, with the remembrance, with the love that had defined their existence. They were gone, but their legacy remained. Their story, their legend, their love, would continue to inspire, to guide, to protect, for generations to come. They were Ira and Lucian, the night collector and the monster hunter, the lovers who had saved the world, the guardians who had proven that love could conquer even death, that remembrance could overcome oblivion, that light could always triumph over darkness. And their light, the light of 1,000 dawns, would continue to shine forever, a beacon of hope, a testament to the power of love, a symbol of unity, a promise of a brighter future. Their story ended, but their love story continued, echoing through eternity, a testament to the enduring power of connection, a beacon of hope for all who dared to believe in the impossible. The light of 1,000 dawns, born from their love, illuminated the world, a legacy that would never fade. Epilogue. Centuries passed. The world changed, evolved, transformed. But the legend of Ira and Lucian lived on, whispered in the shadows, sung in the ballads, etched in the hearts of those who believed in the power of love, the power of remembrance, the power of unity. Their sanctuary, once hidden, became a place of pilgrimage, a sacred site where guardians from all corners of the world gathered to learn, to share, to honor the legacy of the two lovers who had saved the world. The balance between the mortal realm and the shadow realm remained stable, protected by the guardians, guided by the teachings of Ira and Lucian, empowered by the love that had transcended death. One evening, as the sun set, casting long shadows across the land, a young guardian, a woman with eyes the color of amethyst, stood before the ancient altar where Ira and Lucian had made their final stand. She was a descendant of their lineage, an inheritor of their legacy, a protector of the balance. She felt a presence, a warmth, a whisper in the darkness. She looked around, her heart pounding in her chest. She saw nothing, but she felt everything. She felt the love of Ira and Lucian, their presence, their guidance, their unwavering commitment to protecting the world. She felt their strength, their courage, their determination, flowing through her, empowering her, inspiring her. She smiled, tears welling in her eyes. She knew she was not alone. She was a part of their legacy, a continuation of their story, a guardian of their love. And as she raised her hands, channeling her power, her remembrance, her love, she knew that the light of 1,000 dawns would continue to shine, forever a testament to the enduring power of unity, a beacon of hope for all who dared to believe in the impossible. The cycle continued, the legacy lived on, and the love of Ira and Lucian echoed through eternity, a timeless testament to the power of connection, a beacon of hope for generations to come. The epilogue serves as a bridge between their story and the enduring impact of their love, ensuring their legend continues to inspire.